Hey everyone, thanks for stopping back here again. I'm Soraya M and I'm here to talk to you about writing. More specifically, I want you to become the best writer you can be, and I'm here to help. So today we're going to talk about crafting great characters. Without great characters, you simply don't have a story. And I want to talk to you about writing 3D flawed characters that will carry your story and help you in your quest to become a published author. So where do I start? Well, I start the old-fashioned way with a notebook and pen. And to be honest, for me, that is the most simple way to start, although there are fantastic programs out there that a lot of other authors use to help them start their story, work out their scenes and their chapters, and of course, most importantly, work out who their characters are and where their characters fit into their story. But for me personally, writing with a pen and a notebook is the simplest and easiest way to start. I can sit in a cafe, I can sit in my office, in my living room, anywhere, and just really scribble on the page and work on my characters, who they are, what they do, and what I need to know about those characters. Writing great characters will elevate your story from being just ordinary to being fantastic. If you think about the authors you love and the stories that you still remember, even if you read them years ago, those stories stay with you normally because you really resonate and feel for the characters. And for me, I don't believe that you can write a good story without truly understanding who your characters are. Your characters need to be 3D. They need to jump off the page and really be three-dimensional in a way that people reading them feel that they are real. They need to want to understand them, to understand their behavior and just the way they behave on the page. And even if those characters are flawed, which they should be, the reader still needs to feel something for them. They still want to see them grow. They still want to see them achieve. In a romance novel specifically, we often want to see them end up with their love interest, the hero or heroine. And so we want to see a different character at the start of the story to what we find at the end of the story. So how do you make your characters three-dimensional? Well, most importantly, those characters need to be flawed. They need to be real characters, as I said before, but most importantly, they need a backstory. And by backstory, I mean what's happened to them in the past. Now, keep in mind, this backstory does not need to end up on the pages of your novel. In fact, it's really important not to do an information dump of the backstory and tell us a whole lot of information about what's happened to your character in the past. But the backstory is crucial. You are the one who needs to know the backstory as the author. So when you sit down, you need to understand exactly where your characters come from, who they are, what they've been through, what makes them who they are. Because without a backstory, we don't really have a genuine character. We just have a two-dimensional person that we're writing about. So if you look at yourself, for instance, or someone else you know, we all have different pasts. We're different ages, we've been raised by different people. We may have come from a two-parent family, a single-parent family, or same-gender parents. We may have had no siblings, brothers and sisters. We may have had trauma happen to us in our past. And all those things make our characters real, just like they make a human being real. And when you look at it, our characters need to really feel like genuine human beings who we want to relate to on the page. Your character's backstory will influence everything they do in the novel. Someone who's had a vastly different background to another character in the novel will react to situations differently. Their behavior and their responses to situations will be different. So as the author, we really need to understand that backstory so that we are making genuine decisions for our characters, so that we understand if we're writing and the writing feels tough and things maybe aren't going as planned. It may be because you're not being true to who your character is and how that character would likely behave in certain situations. And I guess just how they feel in those situations too is very important to understand as the author. So before you start your story, or even if you've already started, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go and get a simple piece of paper or a notebook and a pen. At the top of each page, I want you to write your character's name, and keep doing this for every main character in the story. It's important to understand your secondary characters as well, but your main characters are the ones you truly need to understand. In a romance novel, that may simply be the hero and heroine. In a thriller, it may only be two characters as well. In a women's fiction novel, you may have multiple characters that you need to understand, or any mainstream fiction. But for me at the moment, I'm working on a story with 3 main characters, all women, and I would write down their names at the top of each page, leave a page or 2 for them. And then I basically want you to almost interview your characters in a way so that you understand who they are. I want you to start the page by saying, who am I? How old am I? Where am I from? Who are my siblings and who are my parents? Just as a really basic, just family history so you understand those characters. Then I want you to ask, do I have a partner or spouse? Do I have children? Where do I live now? What job do I have? What are my aspirations in life? What does my character want to achieve? Are they somewhere at the moment that they wish they weren't? Do they have certain goals that they're trying to currently achieve? You also need to know who the other people are in their life. So that's a really key ingredient for this piece of paper as well. I want you to write down what people in my life are important to me, what things do I like doing, what animals do I have. All those questions, just a basic interview about who your character is. So don't stop at just those questions. Please do develop it more and really ask yourself the questions you need to ask so that you get a better understanding of exactly who your character is. By doing this, you will really be able to, I guess, find your own voice and find your character's voice for each novel you're working on. And for me personally, I've just been through 2 rounds of rewrites and revisions with my current editor, and I wasn't hitting the mark with the novel. I wasn't being true to my characters, and I hadn't gone deep enough with my characters. And I think this goes back to not really thinking through their backstory, making that completely rookie mistake of not understanding deeply who my characters are. Your characters need to be real, and if they don't feel real to you as the author, they're not going to feel real to your audience, who are your readers, and they're certainly not going to feel real to an editor or agent who you might be pitching your work to. So you really need to feel that these characters are real, and by interviewing them or asking questions, finding out more about them and making lots of notes about your characters, you'll start to get a genuine picture of who they are, and that's really important for you to make them real. Another great thing you can do is to write a letter in the point of view of your character. This could even be a letter to another main character or a secondary character, and just really being in the headspace of your character can really help. So writing in their point of view and just being them just for even a short time, even if it's a short letter, can help you get in the right headspace before you start writing, or if you're already writing and you're feeling a bit stuck with that particular character. Now, when I talk about your characters being 3-dimensional and real, and how important that backstory is, but not to necessarily put that backstory on the page, what I'm meaning by that is that there may be something about your character or several things that you don't want to reveal at the start of the novel, but you do want to slowly reveal to your reader as the novel goes on. Well, those things that you're waiting to reveal, they may be big issues that you're just wanting to touch on as the story moves along before building up to a climax. And that thing that you're building up towards will influence how your character is behaving and reacting as well to certain situations. So dropping little hints about the character's backstory or about those things that may become bigger issues in the novel will help it become more real when you reach that climax or when you reveal something major about that character. So do leave little hints about that character's backstory or the certain things that are affecting them or will affect them or have affected them in the past. A great example perhaps is a woman who has become a widow. Now, you may not want to reveal that that woman has been married before or that she's lost her husband, perhaps in a traumatic situation. However, that character will react differently, for instance, if she meets another woman who has also lost her husband or someone in a grieving situation. She will feel more empathy perhaps. She may need to back away because she can't deal with that situation. But if you look at that situation you've put her in, she would react completely differently to someone who may be happily married, who has never grieved for someone they've lost before. So do keep in mind that message of being authentic. And while we're talking about flawed characters who have issues or past backstories that may be traumatic, that's part of what I mean about your character being flawed. It's really important for your characters to feel real and to also be interesting to your reader, for you to give them, I guess, a very flawed background in some instances, the more flawed the character or the more trauma they've been through, it can really make your character seem a lot more genuine. And also, I suppose we can see their growth a lot more on the page. So if they have gone through certain situations or traumas, or even just relationships that haven't worked out, it can make them a lot more interesting to read about, and their journey a lot more interesting as well. Perfect characters are boring characters. I mean, really and truly, if you look at the stories you love, the TV shows you enjoy, the characters are all so flawed. They have so many different issues. They have so many things they've been through, things they're already going through and will go through. And so we really need to make them as imperfect as possible. And I think that journey from seeing a character start as perhaps as one type of personality or one type of individual, and seeing them grow and become completely different characters is something really exciting on the page. It makes the story, it increases the pace of the story. It makes it exciting. That's what makes your reader want to keep turning the page, because they want to be on that journey with your character and see how different they're going to be at the end of the novel compared to the person they were at the start of the novel. I'll use my recent release, Hearts of Resistance, as a great example. So a quick little promotion here. This is my recent release, Hearts of Resistance, with Amazon Publishing, available now. I'd love you to jump on Amazon.com and buy a copy if you haven't read it already. But while we're talking about this story, I have three main characters. So I have Hazel and Rose and Sophia. Now, this story is set in World War II. There's a lot of external conflict going on, which we've already talked about, but the internal conflict and struggles that these characters face, that's what my reader wants to read about. That's what they enjoy. That's why they keep coming back to these novels, because I have three very flawed characters. They have very different pasts, completely different backstories. One was happily married. One is hiding her Jewish boyfriend in her apartment and is terrified that something may happen to him. And the other woman is single, and she is, I guess, looking at everything differently. She wants the adventure. She wants to get out of her boring life. Whereas the character who is hiding her boyfriend in her apartment, she's just desperate for a better life, to change the situation they're in. And the woman who's happily married actually loses her husband. And so she is doing it from a different angle as well, because she doesn't want her husband's death to be for nothing. So as you can see, they all come together, and they're very strong characters, all three of them on the page. But they have their own conflicts. They have their own very distinct backstories. And that's what makes the story interesting, because we can see each character grow in a different way, even though they're going through the same situations and are living through the same times. Their experiences are vastly different from each other. For some of us, we need to start writing before we understand who our characters are, and that's perfectly fine. Don't ever try and fit inside a box just because it works for another author, because it may not work for you. But at some point, even if you just jump in and start writing your story and you completely write by the seat of your pants, at some point you are going to get stuck, and you're going to need to look more deeply at your characters, simply so you understand where they're going and understanding their character arc. So by character arc, I just mean where the character starts, where they are by the middle of the story, and where they have to be at the end of the story, to really make the story gripping and engaging and show that growth of each character. So at some point, even if you do just jump in, I strongly suggest you actually just sit down, jump on your computer or on your write in your notebook, and just start to write down key points, key conflicts, and key backstory moments for each individual character, just to make sure your story is as strong as it can be. If you're a visual person like me, I strongly recommend going onto Pinterest, which you may already be, and or even just doing collaging with cutting out images from magazines, because if you get stuck, or if you haven't written perhaps for a few days or even a week, sometimes it's really hard to get back in the heads of your characters and truly remember and understand who they are. But having that visual source, say on Pinterest, can be really important to look at those characters, see them, just even sit back for a few minutes and look at your characters and remember who they are, what they look like, and then refer to your notes and go between the two of them. I strongly suggest having that Pinterest page, seeing what their house looks like, their surroundings, the secondary characters, your main characters. That visual source is so important, and I find that I will have that Pinterest page on my big desktop screen, and then I'll be working on my laptop, and it really helps me just to stop sometimes times, especially if I'm describing characters, and look at the inspiration, the people that I have inspiring my characters, which really helps me. Music really helps me as well, and I always have a playlist. I often put that on and look at my Pinterest page before I start writing. I don't listen to the playlist the entire time I'm writing, but I certainly do for the first 10 to 15 minutes of my writing day, just to really get back into that story, and the visual and audio aids certainly help with that. So just to recap, we want to create strong, flawed characters. We want to create a backstory for that character that creates a flawed individual. We want to know what's gone wrong in their past. We want to create situations that make that character grow on the page and really make your readers engage with those characters and want to root for them and see what happens in the end and stick with your story. So write strong characters, really think about their backstory, but just remember, don't put too much of that backstory on the page. Make sure you carefully weave it into the story so we can enjoy the story and slowly find out bits of information about your character's past that are true to your character's reactions and their dialogue throughout the rest of the novel. Thank you so much for coming back and tuning in and listening to my second video on Author Coach. If you want me to keep putting videos up here, I need you to subscribe to my channel. It's the only way I can keep loading free content for you. So please do subscribe. Come back every week to watch my latest video, and I'll also be posting author life videos as well, so you can just hear a little bit about how I became a published author and what my story to publication was. You can also visit my website, which is www.sorayalane.com. That's SORAYALANE.com. You can also find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, don't forget, subscribe and you can have access to all my videos, and you'll be notified whenever a new video is available. So thanks again. I hope to see you soon, and do ask questions. I promise that I will answer questions and incorporate whatever you need to know to help you become a better author. Thank you.